Washington never really sleeps. It only changes faces. At midnight, the politicians disappear behind tinted windows. The lobbyists move into private clubs. The businessmen who talk about democracy during the day begin discussing power after dark. And somewhere beneath the marble buildings, the nation's secrets change hands. For months, Jamaal Carter had been fighting a war nobody knew existed. By day, he was an attorney, a respected lawyer, a man who stood inside courtrooms and demanded justice. But at night, he became something else, a hunter. His brother Malik had been murdered because he discovered a conspiracy stretching from Washington's most powerful corporations to the highest levels of government. Jamaal had followed the trail. He had exposed pieces of the network. He had survived assassins. He had dismantled safe houses, and he had come closer to Victor Hale, the billionaire at the center of the Dominion Group, than anyone had ever gotten. But Jamaal had made one mistake. He thought Malik was the only Carter brother they had taken from him. He was wrong, because on a rainy night in Washington, a ghost came home. The old station had been closed for 17 years. No trains, no passengers, no cameras, just darkness and the distant vibration of the city above. A man walked slowly along the platform, tall, broad shoulders, dark coat, gray at the temples. His face was older than the photographs, harder, scarred by years Jamaal could never imagine. The man stopped beneath a broken light. He reached into his coat and removed a photograph. 3 brothers, Jamaal, Malik, and himself. Joe Carter. He stared at the photograph for several seconds, then folded it carefully and put it away. A voice came through the earpiece. "You are really going back?" Joe didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the tunnel. "I should have come home years ago." "You know what happens if they recognize you." Joe's expression didn't change. "They already killed one of my brothers." A pause. "They won't get the other." He removed the earpiece, crushed it beneath his boot, and walked into the darkness. 3 hours later, Jamaal was sitting at his desk. A laptop glowed in front of him. Financial records covered the table. Photographs, maps, names. The Dominion Group had lost 2 shell companies in Singapore and 3 offshore accounts in Hong Kong. Someone was hitting the organization, but it wasn't Jamaal. He stared at the screen. Another encrypted transfer had just been intercepted. The money was moving from Washington to Singapore to Bangkok, then into an account in Bucharest. Jamaal leaned back. "Who are you?" A noise came from the hallway. Jamaal froze. His hand moved toward the pistol hidden beneath the desk. The hallway was silent. Then, 3 knocks. Jamaal didn't move. 3 more. He stood slowly. "Who's there?" No answer. He checked the security monitor. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Jamaal opened the door. No one. Just a small envelope lying on the floor. His name was written across the front. Jamaal Carter. No return address. He picked it up. Inside was a photograph. Old. Faded. A photograph of 3 boys standing beside their mother. Jamaal recognized himself. Malik and Joe, his older brother. Jamaal's breathing stopped. Joe had been declared dead 18 years earlier. A military helicopter crash overseas. No body recovered. But the government had closed the case. Jamaal had spent years believing Joe was gone. He turned the photograph over. 5 words were written on the back. "Stop looking for Hale." Jamaal stared at it. Then another line appeared. "He's looking for you." Jamaal left the building 20 minutes later. He didn't know where he was going. but he knew someone wanted him to follow. His car descended into the underground parking garage. Concrete pillars, fluorescent lights, empty spaces. He reached his vehicle, then heard footsteps. Jamaal turned. Nothing. He walked faster. A shadow moved behind a pillar. Jamaal reached for his weapon. "Don't." The voice stopped him. Jamaal slowly turned. A man stood 20 feet away, older, tired, but unmistakable. Jamaal stared. The man stared back. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Jamaal whispered the only word he could find. "Joe?" The man nodded. "Hey, little brother." Jamaal's face hardened. He drew his weapon. Joe didn't move. "You died. I know. You've been dead for 18 years. I know. Who the hell are you?" Joe took a step forward. "The brother you thought you lost." Jamaal raised the weapon. "Don't come any closer." Joe stopped. "You look just like Dad when you're angry." Jamaal's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to say his name." "I know. You don't get to walk back into my life after 18 years. I know. And you definitely don't get to show up after Malik is murdered and expect me to believe you're here to help." Joe looked at him. "I didn't come back for Malik." Jamaal's expression changed. Joe continued. "I came back because Malik wasn't the target." Silence. Jamaal lowered the weapon slightly. "What does that mean?" Joe stepped closer. Malik was the message. Jamaal stared at his brother. "What are you talking about?" Joe looked toward the parking garage entrance. "We don't have time." "Then start talking." "Not here." "Why?" "Because we're being watched." Jamaal looked around. "By who?" Joe pointed toward a parked sedan. "Black SUV, 2 levels up." Jamaal looked. Nothing. Joe continued. "Gray sedan beside the elevator." Jamaal's eyes shifted. "How do you know?" "I've been watching them for 6 minutes." Jamaal looked back at him. "Who are they?" Joe's answer was quiet. "The people who trained me." A car door slammed. Joe grabbed Jamaal and pulled him behind a concrete pillar. A burst of gunfire erupted. Bang! 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 Concrete exploded beside them. Jamaal drew his weapon. Joe already had his. "Stay down." "I'm not staying anywhere. You're still stubborn, and you're still dead." Joe almost smiled. "Good." Another burst of gunfire. Joe leaned around the pillar and returned fire. The attackers scattered. Jamaal moved to another position. 2 figures emerged from the stairwell. Jamaal fired. One attacker ducked behind a vehicle. The second rushed forward with a knife. Jamaal blocked the first strike. The blade scraped across his jacket. He grabbed the attacker's wrist. The attacker twisted free. Joe appeared behind him. 1 strike. The man collapsed. Joe looked at Jamaal. "You've been busy." Jamaal stared at the fallen attacker. "So have you." A third attacker fired from behind a column. Joe pushed Jamaal aside. The bullet struck the concrete. Jamaal returned fire. The attacker disappeared through the stairwell. Joe grabbed Jamaal's arm. "We're leaving." "Not until I know who they are." "You'll know." "When?" "When we survive tonight." 20 minutes later, Jamaal entered a small townhouse outside Washington. No furniture, no family photographs, no personal belongings, just equipment. Weapons, computers, maps, passports, dozens of identities. Jamaal stared at the wall. "You've been living like this?" Joe removed his coat. "For 18 years. Why?" Because going home would have gotten you killed. Jamaal turned. You could have called. I couldn't. You could have sent a message. I did. Jamaal froze. What? Every few years? To who? Joe looked at him. Your old intelligence contacts. Jamaal's face tightened. Nobody told me. I know. Joe walked toward a table. He placed a thick file on it. Jamaal opened it. The first page contained a photograph of Victor Hale. The second contained photographs of Dominion executives. The third made Jamaal stop. It showed Malik. But Malik wasn't alone. He was standing beside a woman Jamaal didn't recognize. Joe watched his brother. Her name is Elena Chen. Who is she? One of the most dangerous financial brokers in Southeast Asia. Jamaal studied the photograph. What does she have to do with Malik? Everything. Joe opened another file. Before Malik died, he discovered Dominion wasn't operating alone. He placed photographs across the table. Singapore, Hong Kong, Bangkok, Jakarta, Manila. Then Washington. Jamaal looked at the map. It's international. Joe nodded. Dominion is only one branch. Of what? Joe looked directly at him. The Meridian Network. Jamaal had never heard the name. Joe continued. Governments use them when they need things done quietly. Corporations use them when the law becomes inconvenient. Criminal organizations use them when they need protection. And intelligence agencies, Joe paused, use them when they need someone to disappear. Jamaal looked at his brother. Is that who you worked for? Joe didn't answer. That was answer enough. 18 years earlier, a younger Joe Carter sat inside a dark interrogation room. Blood covered his shirt. His hands were restrained. A man sat across from him. You can go home. Joe looked up. Or you become someone who never existed. Joe stared at the man. What happens to my family? They'll be told you're dead. Joe's jaw tightened. Why? Because if they know you're alive, they become leverage. Joe looked toward the camera. How long? The man smiled. Until the job is finished. Joe never went home. Jamaal slowly closed the file. You let us believe you were dead. Joe nodded. I did. Mom died thinking you were dead. Joe looked away. I know. Malik died thinking you were dead. Joe's expression cracked for the first time. I know. Jamaal stepped closer. Then why come back now? Joe looked him directly in the eyes. Because the man who ordered Malik's death knows something I spent 18 years trying to hide. What? Joe reached into his pocket. He placed a small photograph on the table. A photograph of Jamaal, taken outside his law office. Jamaal stared. When was this taken? Yesterday. His expression changed. Joe continued. They're not just watching you. They're preparing to take you. Across Washington. Victor Hale stood in front of a window overlooking the city. A phone rang. He answered. Yes. A voice spoke. Joe Carter is alive. Hale's face changed. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. You're certain? Confirmed. Hale turned toward the room. How? He's with Jamaal. Silence. Hale slowly placed the phone down. An executive asked, Who is Joe Carter? Hale looked at him. You don't need to know. Then he turned toward the window. Get Marcus Kane. Jamaal stood over the evidence board. Names, faces, companies, countries, everything connected. Joe stood behind him. Malik found the Washington branch. Jamaal nodded. And you found the international network. Not all of it. What are you missing? 7 people. Joe pointed to the board. Brandon Steele. Security consultant. He's inside Chen's company. Marcos Moore. He's tracking Chen's financial networks across Southeast Asia. Eddie Cooley. Digital infrastructure. Tony Harrison. Legal operations. Omar Soto. Underworld protection. Then Joe pointed to 2 more names. Shola Freeman. Government systems. And Linda Vasquez. Jamaal studied the names. What connects them? Joe answered. Me. Jamaal looked at him. You're saying you recruited them? Years ago. Why? Because I knew someday I'd have to come home. Joe walked toward the window. And when I did, I wouldn't come alone. A phone rang. Joe answered. Talk. A man's voice came through. Joe, Shola, you need to leave. Why? I found something. Joe's expression hardened. What? A pause. The Meridian Network has a second target. Joe looked at Jamaal. Who? Another pause. Then, Jamaal Carter. The room went silent. Joe slowly hung up. Jamaal looked at him. So this was never about bringing you home. Joe nodded. No. Then what is it? Joe looked toward the dark Washington skyline. It's about finishing the war. Later that night, Jamaal stood alone outside the safe house. Washington glowed in the distance. For years, he had believed his family had been destroyed. Malik was dead. Joe was dead. And he had become a man who trusted no one. Now his older brother was standing beside him. Alive, armed, and carrying 18 years of secrets. Jamaal looked at Joe. One question. Joe waited. Are you really my brother? Joe smiled faintly. That's the one thing they never managed to take from me. Jamaal looked toward the city. Then he said, Then let's make them regret bringing you home. Joe looked at him. They already do. A black sedan appeared at the end of the street. It stopped. The headlights turned off. Joe's hand moved toward his weapon. Jamaal noticed. More of them? Joe shook his head. No. Who is it? Joe stared at the vehicle. I don't know. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She held a photograph in one hand. She looked directly at Jamaal, then at Joe, and shouted across the street, Which one of you is ready to learn what Malik died for? Joe and Jamaal exchanged a glance. The woman threw the photograph onto the pavement. It landed face up. The image showed Victor Hale, standing beside the President of the United States. But that wasn't what frightened Jamaal. Behind them stood someone else. Someone Jamaal recognized. Someone who was supposed to be dead. Joe looked at the photograph. His face went pale. No. Jamaal picked it up. Who is that? Joe stared into the darkness, then whispered, The man who trained me. A gunshot exploded from somewhere in the distance. The woman dropped to the pavement. Joe grabbed Jamaal. Down! More shots echoed through the night. Jamaal pulled his weapon. Joe looked toward the rooftops. The ghost had returned, but the people who created him had returned too.